everybody.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of this and even talking about it. We've all talked to each other about this topic, but how cool that we can all share this together. And especially, we just want to thank you so much because it's super awkward. And it's so vulnerable. Like, I'm shaking inside a little bit.
That's maybe a good first question is, how does everybody feel about talking about this? Because I'm surprised that you're having such a strong
Yeah, we were actually just talking about it before we got on. And I was talking about, like, I didn't send my question over to you guys until this morning because I'm just like, it really exhausts me in like a very hard way to even put brain power into it. So yeah, I was just kind of like, I loved all of the questions that we're going to go over today. And yeah, it is really hard to talk about for me personally. I'll just leave it at that.
So are we going to go into your first question?
Yeah.
And that one was...
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, because what are we even talking about? We're talking about
multiracial families.
Yes. So my name is Janna, and I'm actually I'm 100% South Korean, but I'm an adopted child. So my parents are white, and I grew up in a very predominantly white area. And then I married a white man. So now I have biracial children. So I grew up in a multiracial home. I have an identical twin sister, and then I have another older sister they were both also adopted from South Korea. And so then it's just, it's been a journey, just kind of trying to find my way and figure everything out. Just being part of a multiracial family, but not being biracial myself, having my full Korean identity, but then being raised by 100% white parents. It's just been kind of an interesting thing. Plus now I have to try to navigate a totally different kind of take on it with having biracial kids. So that's me. But I would like to know too, with the other girls, what are your nationalities? Like, what are you kind of?
Can I just ask you one quick follow-up question? How are you feeling right now about this conversation?
So it's funny because I feel like there was a time, and I talked to the sisters, I'm just gonna refer to you guys as that. I've talked to them over the years so much about this stuff, and how it's very, like Julie was saying, or Rebecca was saying, like how it just feels very draining. And so I think that like there was a time, this summer where I was just exhausted, and it was just very painful in terms of reliving a lot of things that I haven't really kind of dealt with, not like really dealt with because I feel like I deal with it on a regular basis, but just the painful parts that. So I think having this conversation is like really good, but I think I was a little bit like, I know that I'm the one who's kind of like different in this scenario, I figured, but so that was also a little bit like intimidating, but I also feel like when I was reading the questions, I was just gonna, I was trying to be confident and think, how so much of my life I felt very like not free to say things because I feel like my voice wasn't valid because I don't feel like I've been heard very much in my life. And I think, having these questions, I was like, oh, can I really answer these? And then and make it be something that is worthwhile to hear. And then I just felt like that was kind of, in my mind, like the devil just trying to like make me feel like I'm not, my opinion and my experiences aren't valid again. And just because I don't have the same experiences as everybody else. And so I think that like, I'm just trying to be okay with like, live my truth and with what I have experienced and know that even if it's not the same as other people, that it's still hopefully worthwhile for somebody, especially if there are other, you know, adoptees out there who come from multiracial families and can kind of relate to the struggles that I feel like I've had. So that's a super long answer, but
I for one, I'm very excited to hear your perspective, because I think transracial adoption is like a very, I'm very interested. I'm excited to hear.
Thank you.
Your experience.
I appreciate that.
It's really amazing too, because like, being that you were predominantly with white people, like that was a lot of my experience. I'm half Puerto Rican and half white, but grew up with the white side of my family represented.
Okay.
And obviously, so in a way, I wasn't ever identified as a white person by other people. And so in a way, I felt like you. And like, so I was full something completely different than all these white people.
Yeah.
And was treated as such, and comments were made in that way. And so as you were explaining that made a lot of sense. Like I very closely related to that for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, and I thought it would be cool too, because some, especially in like most, like, well, not especially, but like just in homes, like a lot of the times, sometimes you're being raised by one parent. And so sometimes you miss out on, you know, that one side that, you know what I mean? So I thought it would be really cool to have your perspective, Janna, and it's like, and it's amazing. And I've learned already so much from even talking to you. Honestly, you are like the first person that started having me like speak out loud about things that I had thought before, and I had like never even put it outside of my body. You know what I mean? Where like you grew up thinking it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm actually gonna say this, you know? And I remember thinking that when we went to Bravo, I was like, oh my gosh, wow. I'm like, there might be some work I need to do inside, you know, and stuff like that. So anyway.
Wow, I did not know that. That is amazing. I had no idea. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, fun fact, my dad grew up in Puerto Rico. So my adoptive father, his dad was a missionary in Puerto Rico. So he grew up in Puerto Rico and he lived there for like 9 years.
I'm from Portland. I have a white mom and a black dad. And I grew up when I was very young, around almost 6, only white people. My parents put us in almost exclusively white Christian schools, and we were almost always the only family that was not white. And it wasn't really until high school that I went to a big public school in Portland, and that was the first time that we can get into that later. But yes, got a very white mom, blonde hair and blue eyes, and a very black dad. And I am excited for this conversation. I love talking about this. So my only limitations is, like I will share, I'm very open about myself. My only kind of limitations around it is, want to be respectful of my family. And, that's the only thing that makes it a little bit tricky because, that's some complications there.
No, totally. We have said the same.
Totally, 100% agree with you. I think that is that's such an interesting thing to bring up, because there are things we've all gone through, and we know that obviously all of us too are moms. We know that moms want to do everything they can to raise amazing kids and to love their kids and show them the love. So moms, we love you. Just throwing that out there.
Do you you or Julia wanna talk about our family structure?
Oh yeah.
For people who
maybe they don't know.
Who wants to do it?
You can.
Me? Okay. No. Oh yeah. So our dad is Mexican and our mom is white, and actually lots of different European, but we knew that she was very Irish and Scottish. But and kind of interesting. We grew up definitely around the white side and definitely around the Mexican side. And I would say we weren't super close with either. So that was an interesting thing. We were a very tight unit within us, our mom and dad. And then and then, holidays and things like that. But really, honestly, it was more of a holiday thing. Like, and we would see like our aunts and uncles now and then through the year, but we weren't really hanging out with the cousins all the time on either side. So that was it. That was an interesting one. Yeah. So that's kind of our history.
So you guys, I'll ask the first question. And yeah, I guess my first question was like, do you think it's important? I mean, these conversations, I think we all agree are important for us to have because we've had them with each other.
Yeah, true.
But do you think it's important that we are putting this out there for people to be able to see and view? And if you do think it's important, what are some of, or helpful, I guess would be the word. Do you think it's helpful? And in what ways do you think it's helpful?
And I guess I'll maybe tell, like when she sent that over, I kind of thought of a few things right off the bat for me. So maybe I'll answer that, and then maybe you guys could like chime in if you had anything to say. But I kind of thought that it's cool for, I think, people who are in multiracial relationships, so we grew up as young kids in a multiracial home. And so we have a little bit of a different, perspective than a lot of people right now, but it's like a huge growing population. It's like one of the biggest growing populations is like, more like multiracial homes, like especially in America. And so I think it would be cool for parents, who maybe are raising young kids and to see maybe what our perspective was growing up. And yeah, I think it's important in that way, I guess, is what I thought.
Yeah.
I'll start, I guess. I definitely think it's massively important. I am married to a Black man, and we have little gorgeous Black, quarter Puerto Rican, quarter white babies. And
they are so gorgeous.
They really are. They are. That's like brag, but they're sweet little boys. I have 5 of them. 10 and under. So I have and all of my husband's siblings married either mixed or white people. So my sister-in-law, her former husband, who she has 2 children with, is a white man. And then it goes down the line. But being a mixed person, raising mixed persons, I think it's been really cool because I completely relate and identify already with how they have felt, little things that they've experienced, things that have, one of my third born, his name is Solomon, and he is a very deep thinker. He's kind of a quiet, like, keep to himself. He reminds me of me when I was little as far as like our family dynamic goes. But he said, like, Mom, he told me he just turned 6 years old. And he said, yeah, I hated school last year. And I was like, why? And he said, because people kept trying to touch my hair. And he's like, I am not your pet. I am not an animal. And they kept trying to touch my hair, and they would say things about my skin color all the time. And I was like, hi, I completely relate to that, son. Like, you are not a pet, and you should never feel like anybody can just come and touch your hair. But being able to have that conversation, especially from the perspective of having gone through it myself, was really amazing. And I think it can kind of, it's been beneficial to even being able to communicate with my sister-in-laws who are white and didn't have the experience that their kids are having. And so, yeah, I think it's just it's a powerful conversation, because for those who have never stopped to consider, like, that is true. I'm raising children who are going to have a different life experience and be seen through a different lens than I have. I think that's empowering for a mom who may not know what her kids are going through, or they've never had to be, the butt of a joke, or treated in a way like, ooh, what are you? Like, my whole life I got asked, what are you? You're so exotic. We grew up in a extremely white city. Like, I felt like there was no one that looked like me, and went to an extremely white school. And thankfully there was 2 or 3 kids that also were either mixed or Latin. And so that was kind of cool. Like, oh, hey, we match, you know? But yeah, I just think it's a very empowering conversation because some people may have not stopped to consider, like, you know, just the perspective of another person. They've never had to walk in those shoes. So I think this really gives people a glimpse into that. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
If ethnic identity is important to you, being like, obviously like that can tie into tons of different things with language and just like everybody growing up in America and, you know, that kind of thing. So if nobody wants to chime in, I'll definitely give my opinion.
Do you wanna lead with like how you are defining ethnic identity?
Yeah, so I feel like for me, like with growing up being like multiracial, I didn't realize until like right around the time I was talking with Janna, and honestly around the time I had kids, that I was like, oh my gosh, like I think about this every day. And I thought about it every day since being a little girl, like just growing up. Like I knew that my mom was a little bit different than me, and just different things like that. And like, as you can hear, it gets a little emotional, very deep. But yeah, and so then I feel like that sent me on a journey because I wanted to be confident in in who I was, so that I felt like I could be strong for my kids. Because I'm like, so I feel like I had work to do here, and I didn't want like those weaknesses or kind of like hurts and pains to like come out as I was raising them. And so yeah, I feel like I came to a better place within inside myself, more identifying, and so that's why I do think it's super important. And I remember telling you guys, like, it's super important and doesn't matter. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm like, super important, and yeah, it doesn't matter. But like, I feel like for me, it was super important. Identity in general is like an important thing, and so obviously, like, your ethnicity is going to be like a sector of that. And so yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I feel like I really do identify as a multiracial person. And I think that I still have so much work to do. And even like talking to you guys, it was exciting to me because I really haven't talked to a lot of people about it. And to be able to talk to you guys about it, that you know, grown up in homes, you know, with parents looking like you or not looking like you, was exciting to me because I really haven't talked to tons of people about it besides my sisters. So yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I think that, you know, for me, ethnic identity has been like something that has been unavoidable my entire life. I think having white parents, and knowing from a super young age that I did not look like them. And I, you know, every time I looked in the mirror, it wasn't like, oh, I just woke up and I look in the mirror and I like how I feel like a white person would look like, oh, hey, this is just me. For me, every day it was, I looked in the mirror and I saw, I am Korean, I am different, I do not fit in, right? And so for me, and I don't think I realized that was my take on my ethnic identity until later in my life, when I felt like I could acknowledge that my ethnic identity wasn't always necessarily associated with positive, like, happiness, right? Like, it was sometimes very like painful, and it was very, very, you know, almost to a point where and I said this, I think I said this to you guys before, like, I didn't want to be Korean. I wanted to be white. And so it was one of those things where, you know, my ethnic identity, I think it's just probably since I've been in my 30s now that I can honestly say, I have a positive relationship with my ethnic identity, and I can proudly say that I am Korean and that I am happy to be Korean, and I'm happy to, you know, just be who I am. But I think, you know, these kinds of conversations are so incredibly important because I think, for our children, obviously, but then also just for people in general. I mean, I feel like the number of conversations that I have had in the past 6 months to a year that I never had before, people just don't realize like the magnitude to which this specific thing affects us, and that my reality and you guys' reality is so incredibly different than their reality purely because of our ethnic identity. And so I think that these conversations are so important. And I'm even having these conversations with my husband or my white parents, you know, that we haven't had before. And so to me, I think ethnic identity is important. And I think it's good to have a positive outlook on your ethnic identity.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and to feel confident and to be happy with who you are and who God created you to be, you know, because that's not always easy, especially right now. So, yeah.
Like, you know, and I think you nailed it. That like, I guess that's the work, is to see that in a positive light. You know.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's really deep.
That totally just like illuminated, I guess, what I was like experiencing being young, is that I wasn't sure if it was okay, you know, or if I wasn't just like a pie. I was like, wait, am I full pie, or am I like I'm thinking of myself that way as like a pie chart? I'm like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you think, okay, am I what? Yeah, I mean, which we can talk about later. But am I this? Am I this? Am I this? Am I this? So it's you're not really. I said you.
Yeah.
There was so much of life going, who am I?
Yeah.
Like, I don't really know.
I loved one time when Tyson said, like, soups are so delicious. And when it's a soup, he was like, does it mean that it's not a carrot? Like, if it's in the soup, or is it still a carrot? And it's like, yeah, it's still a carrot, even though it's a delicious soup. But anyways.
Next.
Yeah. I said, do you consider yourself white? What else did I say? Do you consider yourself to be white? And then I don't remember if I had a follow-up to that.
I think you did, and I can't remember.
I'm like, hold on.
Or is there a side ethnically, culturally that you more strongly identify with?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing on what we were talking about before.
Oh yeah.
With like the ethnic identity thing. I think like I have kind of struggled with if it's important or not.
Oh yeah.
And so I just wanted to say like that my outlook on it is like, it's almost like identity is important, and it is who we are. Like it's a part of our identity, because there's so much that that plays into our identity. And so like it's a part of our identity, but I think that it's when you are separated from the cultural aspect of it, it makes it a little bit harder to really identify as that. Because if you're stripped from that culture, or you're not immersed in that culture, then how do you really get into that identity in a genuine, organic way, instead of trying to be something that you're not? You know what I mean? So that's kind of been the struggle for me, where I'm like, I know it's so important. I know it's so important, but I've just wrestled with it a lot. So.
Yeah. No, and I think that kind of like, I feel like culture will tell you, you know, that, you know, if you do this, this, and this, and this, then you can identify with this.
Right.
You know
exactly.
what I mean?
Which is so silly, because it's like, it doesn't change
who you are.
that we are Mexican.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't speak Spanish. You know, we don't celebrate all the holidays or whatever, but does that make me not Mexican?
Right.
Not identify as as part Mexican woman?
And is it okay to learn about it now? I've had like some of my clients even where they're like talking to me and they're like in a similar situation of like two different parents and being like, well, I wasn't raised around it, so it's like, who cares now? It's over with. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, why? And I was like saying, I'm like, why not explore some of the culture that's in your like history? Like, I think it's super special, and even I like exploring cultures that I don't know anything about, you know. How even special if it's like in your like history and like in your family. So I think that it can get tricky, definitely. Yeah, no, exactly.
But then on another side, like for us, there's because I'm married to a Black man, and so like for my kids, there's a part where we will never know like what that is, and so that's a whole other aspect of it too, to where like it has to be both, because it doesn't depend on that whether you can identify as that, but is it something you can add and it will enrich your life? Yes, like that's a beautiful thing. But,
it might do some healing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Christin, you should answer that question. Do you identify as white, or is there a side you more closely identify with?
You know what's interesting is, you know, and I'm sure you guys can understand, being mixed is like, depending on how I wear my hair, I can be very racially ambiguous. And also get the, you know, what are you? And what's interesting is how many groups think I'm them. So like when I was a teenager and I was in the Dominican Republic and people thought I was Dominican, even though I was like twice the size of everybody on the island, you know, I'm 6'1". I have had Indian people think I'm Indian. I've had, you know, I you know, get everything. Are you Puerto Rican? Are you this, that, whatever.
Right.
But nobody has ever confused me for white in my lifetime. And when I was a kid, my family, we never talked about race. So I had no language or framework for understanding race or racial identity. I just was like this little Black girl existing in mostly white spaces. And I was having experiences related to my race without understanding what I was experiencing, you know, whether it was just kind of the constant messaging you get that you're different, or people, you know, saying things that are kind of just kind of casual racism, and you're like, that was a weird, whatever just happened, I don't know. You know, so
you just walk away from it.
So
like, that's what they said. No.
Yeah. I mean, and I carry, I don't know why, but I carry so many of those experiences with me. And it's kind of interesting, and maybe this is for later in the conversation, but this spring when George Floyd was murdered and then there was this huge outpouring of support for Black Lives Matter, I felt like all of a lifetime of like politely dealing with polite racism, like just kind of started bubbling out of me. And like for like a few weeks, I was like kind of like an emotional wreck. Like, you know, I was not sleeping. I was getting in fights online. I was like, you know, all this crazy stuff. But so to answer your question, no, I do not identify as white. When I was younger and began to first understand race, I identified as biracial, like, oh, I'm equally white and Black. And then the older I got and the more my understanding of race as a construct and what it means, now I identify just as Black first. But then of course I also, you know, I understand that, you know, being light-skinned, I understand what colorism gives me, like light skin privilege, and you know, there's nuance to that. But yeah, so I went from didn't know what race was to I'm both, to no, I'm just the one. So, yeah.
I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how much I carried. I mean, well, I grew up, like, one of the fortunate experiences I had was that I grew up in a Spanish immersion school. And so my first ever teacher, like in the first grade, or well, I should say my second teacher in that school was Puerto Rican. And since it was Spanish immersion, they do not speak English to you at all when you walk into the room, and you just learn. And so I felt a favor with that teacher because I was the little Puerto Rican girl and she was Puerto Rican, and we related. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm special. But then everybody else was like, ew, I don't like her. And then I would have the experience of like other white friends that went to that school that felt like they were like somehow more Latin than me because they had this experience of learning Spanish. And so there would be like just really odd comments. And then, like you said, Christin, when George Floyd, everything that happened with him, I cannot begin to tell you how many inbox messages I got from white women or white people who were like, I mean, out of the woodwork, like, I would love to go out to coffee with you and your husband. And I would love, you know, it basically like brought up all these extra things. I started having all these memories of like every microaggression that has ever been said to me or done to me. And it wasn't just, it was, for me, it was both racism and classism because we didn't have a lot of money, but we grew up in an area where everybody did. And so there was like this, I don't know, this like dual kind of what felt like personal attacks, but it was in both of those areas. And so, and then not to mention the comments from my own family members who were white, who I absolutely love and I hold nothing against. But there would be like, you know, little statements like, oh, well, you're not white though, you're Puerto Rican. And I'm like, yeah, I am Puerto Rican, but it was still in a time where that identity, like all of you have expressed, is like, oh, I'm mixed, you know? Yeah. But I remember being told by someone, they said, but in the eyes of society, you're not mixed. If you have any color, you're that color. And so you're Puerto Rican, you're whatever makes you non-white. And so I was like, exactly. So now I also don't identify myself. Like when people talk to me or, you know, they ask me those questions, it's always like, I'm Puerto Rican at the forefront. And then I can explain all of the ethnic mix. And I think white people also don't understand that they are ethnically mixed as well. Yeah. In order for there to be ethnic minorities, there has to be an ethnic majority. And in our world, in the US, it's like any white European is the like European descendant that is white skinned is the ethnic majority here. But it's like, they're also super mixed. Like my mom's side is incredibly rich with ethnic mixture and I love it. And I've got to experience like going to Wales. I thought I was a quarter Welsh, but my brother took the ancestry.
Are those reliable?
I always wonder the same thing.
I got a little skeptical when I found out that siblings could get different results. And I was like, how's that?
Well, I guess like scientifically, your parents don't distribute their DNA equally. Yeah. So we equally have like 50% from our mom, 50% from our dad. What our dad gives us could be way more generous than what our mother gives us or vice versa in certain characteristics. Yeah. So that's from what I studied. I was like, oh, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. Right. And everybody, I would get comments like, well, whatever your brothers are, you're probably more Puerto Rican than them because they don't look as ethnic as you. You know, I would get little statements like that, or your dad was probably more generous with you in this, you know, whatever. I've heard it all.
What a strange thing to like, I think you and I talked about this once before, but like, how funny would that be if you were to say that to like, about one of their kids? Like, I think maybe you get, you know, we just don't do that. We don't do that because it's so awkward. Like, why would you, anyway.
Or we just don't really talk about like the looks of, like break down the ethnic look of white children. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like, it's more like, oh, you look like your mom and dad, how cute, or you look like your auntie or whatever. But there's this like detailed, like, oh, see, I think his curls are more like this. And I think, you know, I mean, there's so many detailed breaking down of the look of an ethnic person. And I hear it actually from both sides, like the white side, and then my husband's family has, you know, they have their ideas too about different characteristics or different things, or maybe, you know, just different things that they have learned that they might assume, even though they might have learned a stereotype, you know what I'm saying? And then, so it's just an interesting thing, but it's always been a topic in my life ever since like I can remember. Yeah. It was very much like my dad's nickname was the Latin from Manhattan. Like people would call him like, oh, hey, Lou, the Latin from Manhattan. And so it was always like, I remember being so little hearing that and like, oh, like we're different, you know, we're just different people. And so, yeah, so mine sort of morphed like yours, Christin, in that it was like, I am what I am to, I'm obviously very mixed and different, and then, or exotic, or whatever these people are calling me. And I got mad for a while when people were like, what are you? I'm like, I'm a girl. Like,
I'm a human.
Yeah, like I'm a human being. And I would get sort of pissed because I'm like, I've never asked you what you are. Like,
but like, where are you from? I'm from
Portland.
Makes you feel kind of, but like, where are you?
Yes.
Like, where are you from?
Like, what language did your original family speak? You're like
how far back do you want me to go?
Seriously. And I think that like,
it basically comes down to, why aren't you white?
Exactly.
Right.
You look different than me.
What happened? And then when you say, oh, I am.
Yeah, and then they're like, what?
I mean, yeah. But then that gets even weirder. Yeah, I've had so many people. Okay, I've had so many people say, obviously, what are you? Like they think I'm all kinds of different things, like from the Middle East to like just lots of different things. And usually it even can be people who are that, and they want. I think you were saying that too, Christin.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, but anyway. I have had also on the other side, many white people say, oh, I've never thought of you as Mexican. And that's always been really weird for me too, because on one side, like, yeah, we grew up with, I mean, what's interesting too is our stories are very different because we're so far apart in age that we did have, you know, different experiences with like who we were around. But for me, I was mostly around our white side and we hung out with like my cousins and all of that. And so I wouldn't say like I thought I was white, but I lived in a white world. And that is you know what I mean, with like my mom. And so then when people say that, it's very strange because it's like, well, what am I identifying with? I'm with a culture, not necessarily like what I look like. And so, and actually now I kind of take offense to that. I'm like, how can that even be true? Like, do you see me? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And I'm like, well, you think that because of how I talk, how I dress. I don't know. So that's always been an interesting thing. I think at first I don't necessarily know that I would have said like as a kid, I think I'm white. But when someone said something, I was, I think in 10th grade, and I had a boyfriend and his parents did not approve of me because I wasn't white. And I was like, oh my God, weird. I mean, I knew I was different, but that was really like the big point of going, okay, I really have to figure out what the heck's going on in here. Because now, yeah, the world is seeing me different. I didn't know that I was even being, like, I knew I was different inside, but I didn't, and how I felt about the way that I looked outside, but I didn't realize other people were kind of thinking that of me too. I just thought I was maybe like on the outskirts kind of.
How old were you?
I was a sophomore in high school. Old.
That is kind of old to feel that, but
yeah.
Well,
I think I was like 11 or 12 when maybe I was 11, and I had my appendix out, and I remember seeing on the hospital intake form that they had checked that I was Black, and I just was surprised because, you know, again, at that time of my life, I thought that like whiteness was something to claim, and that I was, this is inaccurate. Like, I need to check both boxes or whatever. But I just, that's something that sticks in my mind, that, they checked that I was Black, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like super cool to hear from you guys all, like us getting older and like doing hard work within ourselves, because it's encouraging to me to hear like how you guys view yourself and stuff, because it hasn't been like, oh, it's just simple, it's this. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, oh no, actually there's like some work to be done. And I remember telling these girls, like, when we would go to both sides of the family, I would think about how I was Mexican, like when I was with the white side. And then I would also think about how I was Mexican when I was with the Mexican side. So like, no matter what, I was thinking about how I was Mexican, like always. And so, you know, and like, I think that really messed with me. And I think my mom was shocked. I only recently told her that like a couple of years ago, but I'm like, I've thought about this every day, like since I was little, which is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Like than you. I remember us moving back from Oregon when I was 10, and like asking my mom to take me to my grandma's house so that I could learn how to make tortillas. And like, it was just like lots of things that like I felt like I wanted to like grasp onto that more, and nobody told me to. So that was what was strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I remember telling you one time when I was really struggling with my identity, and you're like, I just always like looked at my skin and I was like, oh, I'm brown. And I was like, yeah. And I always felt like you had like more of a hold on it. Like I always like looked up to you in that way, that you seemed more confident, like in being yourself, I guess. But yeah,
I felt
both of you guys really. I was glad to have sisters. No, seriously.
I think that was definitely much harder for me. You guys all know that too, probably. I've just always really struggled with confidence in general, and I should say in general. I think it's very much tied to this, where you want to fit in. You like you were saying, Bekah. Like I wanted to fit in with everyone, and I never could. So especially when it came to like Christian schools and everyone else looking, nothing like you, and everyone's wearing a certain things, they look a certain way, and this is so crazy. Like I actually think about, I can't believe I actually thought that maybe if I tried hard enough, I might.
You might
I might look like them.
Oh,
like if I straighten my hair like long enough in the morning and get it perfectly, flat to my head, and maybe dress this certain way, like maybe I would be like these people who are on stage and looking the way they are, because they are the ones that are like the most amazing. And in that way, it was connected a lot to God, which I think is also horrible. And that's a whole nother issue. But that meant you were good.
Right.
So I wanted to be good, and I was also looked at as not so good because I talk tons, and I do think this is an interesting topic because obviously some people don't agree, but I did feel like a lot of negative from leaders and teachers, I think based on really how I looked, and maybe how I presented myself or whatever. And a lot of it too was like, I was actually really struggling. I was definitely trying to be someone I wasn't. And so you guys and all of you guys have been really helpful with that. Bekah, I remember we talked tons about this. Like,
well, we had a lot of shared experiences that were unique.
Yeah, kind of left that whole like church situation and going like, I actually can't do this anymore, and I won't do this anymore, and this is who I am. And that was a lot of years later. And that's actually, I think straight hair is beautiful. Like, straighten your hair, that's great. For me personally, it was very emotional, and that's why I don't anymore, because I knew what that meant for me. I was trying to be something that I wasn't, and I wasn't just going, this is who I am. Like, deal with it.
The hair thing though is like such a huge part of my identity. And when I was younger, I did not understand this at the time, but I had a lot of internalized anti-Blackness, like internalized racism, to where I truly believed that like white people hair was the only beautiful hair. Right. And, you know, I guess we're maybe all about the same age. I don't know, I'm 38, but when I was a kid, you know, all of the magazines, all of the teen magazines, all of the like hair tutorials and all the models, like there was almost no Black women, period. But then there was like definitely no Black women rocking their natural hair. Right. And so when I was younger, I had such a complex about having like big poofy hair. And
you say that.
Like, when I was younger, I was just mortified, and you know, I just felt like it was this, you know, it really, it speaks so much to the power of representation, because like nobody could tell me that I was pretty, or that my hair was pretty. I didn't believe it, because obviously, you know, look at all of the, you know, look at what this culture is really celebrating, and it's not this. And it really was not until I started to actually really see beautiful Black women with their beautiful natural hair that started to unpack for me, and like really transform my relationship with my hair. And you know, now I was in my mid-20s when I stopped getting it chemically treated. I used to get a relaxer, and again, like you said, Carla, you know what? There is nothing wrong with straightening your hair. I like when I see, you know, a Black woman rocking a fresh, you know, blowout. It looks awesome. Like everybody should be free to do whatever they want with their hair. But for me, it was like, it was really learning to actually really love what was on my head, and you know, and loving my features, and you know, whatever else. And now I'm in a place where, you know, I mean, I'm in Norway, so like the hair care situation here is not great for me, which is, so, you know, now if I had the chance, I would occasionally go and get a blowout. But for the most part, I'm like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life working against my hair because, you know, I'm believing some lie about how it should look. And so the hair is a really big issue.
Well, and I actually, like, interestingly, like when you guys are talking about all of these things that you kind of like being biracial and trying to figure out, you know, do I identify as white, or, you know, like the other side of who I am. But for me, it's interesting because growing up having white parents, you know, I feel like so many people, for so much of my life, I remember people saying things to me like, oh, like you're a Twinkie, you're yellow on the outside and white on the inside, you know, and they would just like, I still specifically remember, like when you guys are talking about what me and my sisters have decided is like the white is the standard of beauty. So we never felt like we could ever meet that standard of beauty, right? So we were always like, well, our hair is dark, you know, our eyes are, you know, not the right shape, and our faces are flat, and, you know, all of these things. And so it's just interesting because I feel like that for me was also just this very difficult, you know, I remember in high school, I just completely put so many blonde highlights in my hair because I wanted to have blonde in my hair because that's what all of my friends had. And it wasn't until like more recently that I was like, I'm just gonna grow out all my hair so it's straight black, and I'm just gonna have my natural hair color just because I wanna be happy with who I am. And so I think it's that same dynamic. It's just different because I'm not personally biracial, but being raised by white parents, you still have that conflict of who am I as a person? Who should I identify more with? And I think I still remember like when it was like more common to, you know, like when you were on, I don't know, there were like those chat rooms or like just talking to a boy on the phone. I still remember because my name was Janna Beckwith, which is a very Dutch name because my parents are Dutch. I remember being like terrified that when the boy on the other end of the line figured out that I was not a white Dutch girl, that he was going to be so disappointed that I was Korean. And so it was almost this like, you know, because I sound white, like if I'm talking to somebody on the phone, they're never going to know, you know, because I sound American, that I'm Korean. And so there were parts of me that longed to identify with that whiteness, you know, because I was raised in a white household and I went to the same as some of you, like very predominantly white Christian schools. That whiteness was just a part of me it was very strange. So it was such a conflicting thing for me identity wise, because I was like, when we went back to visit Korea when I was 12 the first time, every single Korean person knew I wasn't actually Korean, right? So then we figured out, we don't belong there because we can't speak Korean. We look American to these Korean people. So we didn't fit in there, and then we don't fit in here either. So you know what I mean? It's just this very difficult thing where I think that as biracial, you know, people, you probably struggle with the same kind of thing. You don't feel like you fit in either group. And then it's like, well, then where does that leave me? You know, because it's not like there's really a lot of us, you know? And so then you're just kind of like, okay. And honestly, to be completely honest, when I first met the sisters, I literally was like, I was so drawn to just wanting to be around you because I was like, there were no other people in my life currently in Lansing that I felt like I could be my true self with, and that I could have these real conversations where I felt like alone, you know? And so for me, it was like that friendship has always been just such a like life-giving thing for me, where I felt like, you know, not that I'm saying other relationships weren't, but I just think that with my relationship with you guys, I think the reason why like I just grasped onto it so much was because you made me feel more like okay with who I was, you know, because of all of the whiteness that was surrounding me constantly. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing, even though I'm not biracial, but yeah.
Which is so cool because I feel like this group, like the two, you know, Bekah and Christin, you've been such a huge part of like my journey too. So it's just really cool to see like that connection and just really letting people just be themselves and not trying to like, I don't even know why we feel that pressure.
Because like it's really what we were saying, like, is it okay? It's 100% okay. Like I think that was like like so crazy. I think that was for me too. Like I'm like, am I okay? Yeah, you're okay. Like you're not wrong. Like am I wrong?
Because you don't fit into
you know what I mean?
group.
Yeah. Does it, I know. Yeah. Sometimes I don't fully make sense.
Right.
No, you totally do.
We can like read each other's brains. Is it okay that I don't?
Is it
fit
okay to be
this
biracial,
box?
multiracial? Is it okay to to like not know the language? Or I mean, I've always wanted to know Spanish so much, and it was sad kind of how it got lost like in our like history, that you know people were not wanting people to have accents and thinking that it would be better for them to, you know, not sound, you know,
be mistaken
have an accent, I guess,
for Italian or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of where our language got lost. And yeah, so anyways, I don't know, that was kind of an off trail.
But yeah, agree.
I was just gonna say, that's why I think, like, to answer my question, the first question that I put out there, that's why I felt like it was so important, Janna, is because of what you're talking about. It's just normalizing that, like, our feelings and the tension is a normal thing that people experience, and talking about it, I think like anybody who is to watch this video could see that talking about it it already just uplifts everybody who's involved talking about it. Because you feel like you're heard, you feel like you're not alone, and it kind of moves you like closer to that healing place, you know, of being like, hey, I guess I'm not just like, you know, dealing with these emotions for no reason, which is, it's kind of an interesting thing that happens in America. Like there's this problem created, and then there's the ramifications that come, and then there's the, you know, the voice that comes behind and says, what are you even talking about? That's not real.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually it's super real. And if we're gonna like heal it in our nation, we need to talk about it, you know?